Now for some analysis, let's bring in Michael Lynk. He's a professor emeritus of law and a former special rapporteur for the human rights situation in the Palestinian territories. Michael, great having you. When officials say no longer famine, what does this actually mean on the ground?
Well, it means that we shouldn't be taking our foot off the pedal. The integrated food security phase classifications, which has been created by the United Nations, has 5 different levels of food insecurity, the most serious of which at level 5 would be famine. And they had declared that earlier on this year in parts of Gaza. What they're saying now is that there's been an improved flow of food and humanitarian aid going into Gaza, but most parts of Gaza are at level 4, one step below famine, which is acute food insecurity. And this has, I think, anybody who pays attention both to food security for vulnerable populations, as well as those who pay attention to what is going on in Gaza, extremely worried. We're only seeing something like 100 to 150 trucks a day of humanitarian aid being allowed in by Israel to feed the 2.2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And prior to the war, which began in October 2023, we were seeing as many as 600 trucks a day going in with humanitarian aid and commercial aid. The UN and other humanitarian organizations are saying there needs to be at least 500 to 600 trucks a day going in order to meet the humanitarian needs of the population there.
And what do you expect agencies to do next?
I'm hoping that they'll continue to push with respect to increasing the humanitarian aid. They've been very clear with respect to the obstacles being placed by Israel for the allowance of aid at scale to get into Gaza. We can point to a decision made 2 months ago from the International Court of Justice, the highest ranking court in our international system, which said that Israel has an obligation to cooperate with the United Nations and with humanitarian organizations to allowing food and other humanitarian goods in at scale. And this hasn't been happening. That Israel has to cooperate with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, which has actually tried to expel from the occupied Palestinian territories. The other big danger right now is that Israel has set up a new registration system for humanitarian organizations who do facilitate the flow of goods into Gaza. And many organizations are saying they're unlikely by the end of this month to be deregistered and not being able to participate in the flow and distribution of humanitarian aid. And they've called attention by a statement issued earlier on this past week to the dangers of them being left out of the humanitarian efforts in Gaza, and pointing out that the humanitarian needs will continue for a long time to come.
Michael, I'd like you to help us understand a little better what's going on the ground. What options does a Gazan have every day? You know, they start their day, right? They need to make sure they feed themselves and their families and so on. What are the options for them on the ground?
Well, they're pretty dire right now. Let's start with just shelter. You know, there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are living in tents, generally on very sandy soil near to the Mediterranean Sea. We've had extraordinary weather conditions over the last 2 to 3 weeks with the Mediterranean winter hitting Gaza, huge amounts of rain, which means these areas have been flooded, the tents have been damp, bedding has been absolutely soaked. People are wearing clothes that have been entirely soaked with water as well. And then so one is trying to keep your family warm and dry, which is a huge challenge. The second is trying to get to these different food distribution depots in order to be able to get enough food to bring back to your family, of trying to find water, not only for consumption and cooking, but also to be able to clean yourself, and for also dealing with issues of sewage and sanitation as well. And you have no idea when aid at scale is going to come in. You have no idea on the longer term as to when reconstruction and rehabilitation is going to happen in Gaza. The World Bank is already saying that there's an estimated to be at least a $70 billion price tag attached to trying to rebuild Gaza. Then you have the difficulty of trying to find donors who are going to come up with that money when there's no security for the fact that another war, another assault on Gaza by Israel won't happen in the future, and you're then spending good money after bad. So all of this, I think, is portrayed in the future of any Palestinian family in Gaza, not to count the fact that there's no economy in Gaza. The area has been flattened over the last 2 years, and an economy will only start when money starts to flow to start the rehabilitation of the Strip.
Michael Lynk, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, Diego.